I find this video so interesting that I thought sharing it with you.
There is no relationship without power dynamic. That is not a dirty word for me. The minute you depend on someone, they have power.
How do we find the balance between what we talk about together versus what we treat as independent and individual money?
I think that the balance of togetherness and separateness is among the two, if not the most important task of a relationship. The making of a couple is that.
For a couple that's newly married, what advice would you have for them around money?
Don't wait till you're divorced to find out.
Welcome back to Love and Other Assets. I am very excited today for our special episode where I'm going to be welcoming my husband and co-founder Channing and our advisor Esther Perel. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
You know, we started Plenty after we began merging finances and saw what a mess that could be. We'd both worked in Silicon Valley for over a decade, and we knew there had to be something better for today's couples. Today, Plenty is a wealth platform that makes it easy to invest, budget, and plan for your future together. Built for couples. Esther generally needs no introductions. She is a New York Times bestselling author, psychotherapist, and one of the most recognized voices for her original thinking around relationships. Her TED Talks have over 40 million views, and her bestselling books include Mating in Captivity and State of Affairs. And definitely one of the things that we've both listened to a lot includes her podcast, Where Should We Begin? So I'm very excited to welcome her today to talk about all things love and money. Thank you again.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. I was thinking love and other assets. That in itself, very rarely do people actually think about other assets in the beginning and think about money. Mm-hmm. So my question is, you're not different from other couples. You started to go out, somebody had to pay for something. Mm-hmm. You had to decide who's going to pay. You had to decide what kind of places you could afford to go. If you had kind of the similar sense of what you can afford, mm-hmm. How did you, and some of it is spoken about and some of it in the beginning is very hard to talk about. So people sniff. Mm-hmm. They kind of try to sense, watch what they wear, try to get clues.
Mm-hmm. We met at work. And so I think that actually
you had data points.
Yes, we already had some data points because we worked together in the same company. Mm-hmm. And I think even early on, we hadn't had a formal date for a long time. We just got to know each other during work meetings, mm-hmm. The first couple minutes before we're about to start a team meeting. Yes.
How soon? I mean, that's a question people are asking all the time, right? How soon should we start to talk about money and everything that surrounds it? But rather than as a generic question, do you think that because you were working in tech, in fintech, that kind of predisposed you? This is easy for us. We have other topics we won't touch, but money we can talk about? Or
I think it made it a little bit easier for us to talk about money because of our backgrounds. But we still ran into, I think, a lot of the same discomforts that many couples run into, where you start divulging the details of how much you're making, how you're going to share split expenses, who's going to pay for what.
I still remember because we were coworkers mm-hmm. and we were friends at work for a long time before we ever had what we now consider our first date. Right. But I do remember there was a turning point for me, which was the first time I let him pay. And I remember feeling like, oh, maybe I should ask to split the bill. There was this split-second decision, but I was like, I think there's something here though. And I think he likes me more than just a regular coworker. So let's see where this goes. He was very much like, I can get this. Let me get this one. And I remember making that decision. And that for me, I think changed some of the emotion around it too. Is, oh, okay, there's more than just friends here.
So say more. Mm-hmm. By allowing him to pay for me, it meant what? More than just it was more. What did it mean for you? Because what you instantly have highlighted is the connection between emotions and money. Yeah. I mean, they are inseparable. Yeah. So what did it mean to allow him to take care of you? Because that's what it was, mm-hmm. right? Yeah. To allow you to depend on him, owe him, be grateful to him. That instantly feels like, on the one hand, it's a loving gesture and it brings that feeling, but it also creates an instant power dynamic.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I still remember because when I go out with friends, we're always very careful where we split the bill immediately. We immediately send the Venmo. There's no owing. It keeps very clean. When my mother was raising me, one of the things she used to talk to me about when we first started dating was to remember to treat any person that I'm seeing as someone's son. Don't, take advantage. And so for dates, if I ever thought I wasn't going to see someone again, I would always split the bill.
Right.
But it was a very big deal if I let someone pay because I knew that there would be another time.
It meant you had feelings for them.
It meant I had feelings, and I also planned to get it next time because there would be a next time, or I intended for there to be a next time.
And do you remember that one?
I do remember. I was completely oblivious to everything that was going on, but I do remember the occasion.
But do you remember the transaction around money? Did you notice anything about that? Or for you, it was just, I can get this one. It's no big deal kind of thing. It's a bill.
It was pretty low key.
So at what point for you did a certain behavior together around money begin to mean a different weaving of a narrative between us? Because people typically ask, not did they pay, did you pay, did you share, people usually ask, did you sleep together, did you kiss, did you that's the things that people measure to see the progression of the relational story. And I think it's very interesting to actually, and equally true, that the way that the transactions around money are translating feelings, weaving of a story that is on an emotional level between two people.
Yes, for me, that's certainly true.
Yeah, I would agree as well. I think something that you mentioned earlier, it's almost like some little tests, I think, that come around money. And I tried to pay for everything, and Emily would push back and not let me pay for everything. And I learned to trust that she saw some level of equality there, that she didn't expect me to pay for everything in our relationship. Which is,
what does paying for everything? I know what letting him pay means.
Yeah.
What does paying means? I'm a gentleman. I'm upstanding.
Yeah, I can provide.
I've achieved something.
Mm-hmm.
I can all of the traditional.
Yeah, I think it means a lot of those things. And then at the same time, there's this reality that we're both earning income.
Mm-hmm.
I knew we were earning somewhat similar income. So to have just me pay for everything would have felt like maybe relying on traditional gender roles in a way that I'm not sure how I would have felt about that.
Was there a time when you suddenly shifted that and it was no longer equal on the income level? And then what did that do?
Yes. Emily began making more than me at one point. And we didn't change our spending behavior then. We pretty much split things 50-50 by that point of our relationship.
So he helped me with the negotiation to get the raise that ended up meaning I did earn more. But it was a lot through his support and encouragement to ask for what, he thought I was worth.
Mm-hmm. Would you consider that value contribution to the income of a household or of a couple? Is it he helped me?
Mm-hmm.
And because he was supportive, or is the person, maybe one person can do this job that is worth that amount of salary, but it's this one who knows how to make the negotiation? Do all of them belong to the pool of value contribution?
I think that was my first taste of it within our relationship, of it being really a team. And it really was through his support, I was able to earn more to a degree that I don't think, I'd ever really thought of it that way before. But I think even now, seeing, when one person covers more things, maybe makes a dinner so the other person can work a little bit more, I do think that actually was probably the earliest version of that,
Right.
which was supporting me in those negotiations and then making it actually possible to earn more.
So, one of the first words one needs to throw into the basket when you talk money in a relationship is fairness. How did you come to define fairness and then set it up?
I think the question really came up when we moved in together and began sharing the majority of our expenses. Because up till that point, it was easy to say, I'll pay for this one, you pay for that one.
Mm-hmm.
When it became a material amount of our spending was shared, we really had to have those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
At first, when we were earning similarly, it was 50-50. That felt right. As it evolved and Emily earned more. We stayed 50-50. The conversation there was that our consumption was the same. So I wasn't spending more than I would have spent if Emily wasn't my partner. Therefore, it didn't feel right to have her pay more than I was paying. I think if I'd been living a different lifestyle because of Emily's income, we probably would have had a conversation about adjusting our shared contribution to expenses based on income versus based on 50-50.
But when you rented your first apartment together or whatever you rented,
Yeah.
how did you negotiate that?
What we define as moving in together, it was during the peak of COVID. And we actually...
That's when many people moved in together.
Yes, exactly. And at the time, I had 5 roommates and he had 2 roommates. And so we looked at the situation. We no longer had to go into an office. And we said, why are we here in San Francisco paying this amount of rent? So when we first started thinking about what was next, we made the decision actually to pack up all of our stuff, donate a bunch, put the rest of it into storage, and we traveled for almost 2 years. And we did talk about, how much we thought was reasonable to put towards rent. But by and large, we were saving money by traveling together and leaving San Francisco. The amount that we were each spending on rent and food were fairly similar. So we didn't have that many differences.
Yeah.
There were small things here and there for sure. But I think by and large, we had such similar numbers that it wasn't anything that really felt like it was a tension before we moved in.
So which was the first difficult conversation about money that you had?
I'll say the first difficult conversation was about other assets. And I was aware that Emily came to our partnership having worked at another tech company. So much of compensation in tech is equity in the companies that you worked for. And Emily had worked for a company that was very successful. So I knew we had different assets coming into the partnership. And I remember us sitting down actually in New York City and talking about what that meant for us. And it was a very uncomfortable conversation.
Because
it required a vulnerability about this paradox I had of wanting to embrace Emily's incredible abilities as a professional and everything she'd achieved and loving that, admiring that, and also feelings I was having come up around insecurity. What's it going to mean for me to have less assets than Emily? How is she going to see me? How do I see myself? How does society see me? And it was incredible how having the conversation where I acknowledged having some of these feelings come up and I'm not proud of them. I'm actually kind of embarrassed that I'm having these feelings in the first place. And Emily holding them and us having a conversation about it where even just taking that shadow and putting it out in front of us changed the way that it felt for me. Yeah.
But it's a shadow that is not just personal. It's all, you're talking about vast cultural legacies, about masculinity, about providers, about the role of a man, of a caregiver. And what's changed is that you think, how can I admire her and then have those feelings? I shouldn't have those feelings if I really admire her, when in fact, both are existing inside of you. And yes, it makes them like, then what is it? If that's not the definitions of manhood and masculinity and achieving and responsibility and confidence, then what will it be? And can I experience it differently than in it making me more insecure? Can I experience it in, wow, it's an amazing partnership to be with someone who, in a way, takes away that enormous responsibility that men have had to carry for centuries. That doesn't mean they don't have to do anything. It just means that they don't have to do it alone. Because that's the main thing that men have often done. And then maybe I'll ask you first before I give the other side of this. Mm-hmm. So what was that one for you?
I think I remember that conversation really well. I think I have always been driven to do something with what I work on in my career. And I'd always had this fear that it would potentially be something that I need to hide or would be hard to face for a partner that I was with. And I
don't
think
outsmart him.
And exactly.
See that
exactly.
There's a lot of archaic cliches in lying underneath a lot of this.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think, family is so important, and the future family and kids, that is very important to me. But in this chapter, my career is very important to me. And I think I was worried with how that would be received or misconstrued by someone. And I think when Channing first shared that with me, I felt so much safer in that it wouldn't be something that would catch me off guard down the road that he would have hidden, for years and years and years. It was something that he was comfortable enough to talk about so we could address it. And for me, it didn't matter. I think if you look out into our lives and start to play out, okay, well, if we're together for 5 years, and what about 10 years or 15 years? The gap the disappears pretty much. And so I hadn't really thought about it being, something that I was concerned about, but I was really grateful. And I think it built a lot of trust to know that we could talk about it.
Yep. What did you think of what I said before about the not doing it all alone? Does that speak to you, or does that?
I think it speaks to me. I think it's the part of that conversation that spoke the most to me when I was able to clarify, we were able to talk about it, is which path do I want? Like, I love all the parts of Emily, and I love what she's capable of professionally. And I want to be a partner that supports my partner in giving everything she can back to the world, and is supported in doing the same myself. And that comes into fundamental conflict with me then indulging an insecurity around how much money she makes or how many assets she has. Because if I indulge that, I won't be that supportive partner. So when we were able to put those two things out, it was so clear to me, this is the path that I want to go down, and has made it much easier to walk down that path.
And after difficult conversations, have you had fights? She has one instantly.
What are you going to say?
I think I came from a family where we were always very thoughtful and probably more on the frugal side when it came to spending on food. And the memory that just came in mind was, I think even just last week, we had breakfast, and, we ordered, I think Channing ordered like an omelet. He added avocados and bacon, and that restaurant clearly made most of their money off of people adding. And so I think the additions were already more than 50% of what the omelet was. And I remember sitting there just being like, oh, okay, don't say anything. It's his own decision. But
made the omelet 100% better. So I think made sense. But
you didn't even notice it, is the difference.
Yes.
And then the question for me is, you did not notice it because you've never had to? And you grew up with more means? Or did it that you were taught to look, but you did have, but it didn't start its way? So now we're going into money and values and what's worth it and what is worth it to spend on. It's not how much you had added, it's the fact that you were busy there watching him add. Whereas he was thinking, I'm improving on my omelette. That's a perfect example. Let's unpack.
I think my family definitely thought about value from how full are you afterwards too. That was definitely part of it.
But wait, the value was sustenance. Was the value sometimes abundance?
Quantity of food, yes. We would go more to the restaurants where they had larger portions because we thought that was a better value.
Was there a permission toward indulgence as it plays out around money?
Generally, it would happen when we did a family trip. The trip would be, we're not going to think about money.
How many were you?
4 of us. So
and
my parents, my brothers.
5.
5, okay.
And we would think if we'd go on these trips, we usually do, one bigger trip per year. And during that trip, normally during the year, we'd be thoughtful, when we go out to eat, and we'd be taught to know, look at the price, look at the receipt, look at the invoices. But when we were traveling, that was we don't travel all that often. Get the dessert. We don't normally get dessert.
Did you review the bill?
Always.
Did you review the bill?
Yes.
You were taught to review the bill?
No, that's something I learned later.
How?
When I became responsible for my own money.
And you were taught to review the bill?
Right. My parents would hand us the check, actually, and have my brother and I double check the math.
It's the best way to learn, And was there, here's a value.
Mhm.
It's not needed.
Mhm.
It's not necessary. You can do without. Was that a value?
My parents would probably cause more of like the self-control and the discipline.
Mm-hmm.
That was definitely valued. You know, being able to say, oh, I'm not going to do that. I'll save the money.
Did you also sometimes have, if it pleases you, go ahead?
I would say usually it was if they wanted to gift something, my family had a very big, well, I won't buy it for myself, but I'll buy it for you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we saw indulgence with gifting like that, but very rarely for indulging for yourself.
Right. How about you?
I think it was less precise. We'd say, oh, that's too much money, that's too little money, but we wouldn't get into the details of exactly how much was the right amount for something. It was more of an arbitrary judgment that was passed down from our parents.
It's the right amount, but it comes with, you're allowed to spend on yourself. You're allowed to lavish yourself. You're allowed to spoil yourself. You're allowed to be abundant or to indulge. It's these words that kind of says other things are more important than how much it costs, which is exactly what happens when it's a gift you give to someone else. The gifting of something to someone else is more important than how much it costs. It's not the money. It's what's the value underneath that is being reinforced. And there is around money often an abundance mentality and a scarcity mentality, measured somehow around money, but it usually means something else. Food is okay, travel is not. Books are okay, food is not. Living in the moment is it matters. Who needs to save, I could be dead tomorrow. I mean, it's endless how much the values around money become existential values, values around life, around love, around friendship, around giving, receiving, sharing. It's all embedded in there.
I mean, I think that's definitely a conflict that we see, when couples are talking about how much are we saving versus how much are we spending right now? How much do we enjoy today versus we put aside for our future? And I think that is something, especially when you come from a family background where that's different, it makes those conversations much harder.
I mean, I went back to look at a series of questions around, but every question ended with, how can I bring this up? How can we talk about this without fighting? How can I not make my partner feel lousy? Or how can I not be made to feel lousy for bringing it up? I mean, it didn't really matter what the subject of the money actually was. In the end, the relational communications piece is what people were really asking the question about.
So what advice would you have for couples?
I thought if I looked at what were the questions, in the end, what people were really asking were three things. How do I talk about this because it's a power issue? And I feel my partner is taking too much control, or I don't want them to think I won't need this control, or I have a hard time relinquishing control. I've taken care of my money all alone myself forever, and now suddenly we need to do this together, and I don't want to have to relinquish the control. So it had to do with power and control. Or it had to do with trust, care and closeness. My partner has debts. How much is it my responsibility to pay for them? Or I have, debts is a major one in couples. Or we moved in together. How do I know that you moved in because you really love me and not just because it's convenient and it makes it cheaper? Can it be a matter of the heart and not just a matter of the wallet? So that's the care and closeness piece. And then the third one had to do with respect and recognition. My partner has asked me to help them. They've already tried a few times to start a new business. How many more times do I have to continue to do this? I'm not sure. I really respect that this is their forte. It doesn't look like, or how do I know that it is, that this is the way this works? And you can do this 6-7 times until finally something works. In the end, I looked at 12 different questions like this, and everything, 15, maybe even more, came down to these three dynamics. Those were the relational dynamics that defined what the conversation was actually about, or underneath anyway.
So
does that make sense? I mean, you're the ones who
Yeah.
I put stuff out? You tell me, yes, we've seen that too, or no, this is not at all. But that's how I interpreted it.
I definitely think so. I think, with the power and control, I think that comes out in a lot of the ways for how couples talk about what is our money? What is my money? Do we keep things private or not? Maybe the independence piece comes out because they're used to managing their own money for so long. And it feels so scary to now be like, not only do you have the ability to see what I'm doing, you actually have a say in it. And that is a relinquishment in control too. And I think for a lot of couples where it used to happen at marriage, where you would fully merge all of your finances, there's not that moment anymore for most couples today. And it's really more like there's baby steps. You might, even when you're dating, start to share a little bit more about where you are. When you get married, you might open up your first joint account, but it doesn't mean that you're using it for everything.
Or that you're giving up on your independent account.
Exactly. And I think for a lot of couples today now, that is not as obvious, which I think both is because people are used to be more independent, but it makes it more complicated because it's not like there's an obvious one-size-fits-all best solution anymore in the same way.
No, I mean, I was mentioning it today on my way coming here. I come from a refugee family where my parents started out with nothing together, and therefore it always was together. I've never known, in my mind, there was no such a thing as to be married and not have your entire finances joined. Until I came to the US and I started to practice psychotherapy in New York and in Boston. And I was realizing that, no, not at all. I would find out because I didn't even ask at first because I assumed wrongly. And then I began to ask and I started to hear people say, no, we have everything separate. And so he contributes this amount for the household and then the other one, he contributes that for the household. And it was a completely new reality. And I realized this is, it's older. People have already, plus they come with something. If you come with something, it's a very different story than what I grew up with. And the need to remain independent is extremely important, and it's defined in large part around money.
Over all the years, when you've had these couples in your therapy room, what are the different structures of managing money that you've heard of?
The most interesting one that I heard of that I learned from a couple was the concept of value attribution. That to be a provider, or what you make or what you bring, wasn't just going to be measured in dollars, in bills. And that opened up a whole, this is not recent, but it totally changed my way of thinking. Because that same artist that wasn't necessarily earning much had just renovated the whole house. Hands, nail by nail. Yeah. And that property had completely risen and changed in value and the quality of life had improved, that they were able to build a room for this and a shed and a whatever. And that was money. So that when the other partner came and said, my partner isn't providing, he isn't putting bread on the table, I'm like, that is not how I see it. Have you considered that this whole renovation is a 1-year salary? If you hired someone to do this, this is how much you would be paying. That liberated me because what happens is that when people come and they're stuck, there's rigidity. It's you make, you don't make, it's fair, it's not fair. Money is not a thing around which people talk with subtlety. So I had to find other ways to suddenly shift and say, have you ever looked at it this way? And do a whole reframe and make people go like this, because that's when they stop. And instead of being reactive, they become curious and they say, never looked at it like that. And that's what you want. Right? So that was a major one. The amount of conversations I've sat where one person says to the other, you're spending too much. And the other says, but it's my money. Well, is it your money? What makes it your money? Just the fact that you are the one earning it? What about the money value of the person who stays at home to take care of everything that a home and a family needs taken care of, including kiddos, if there are such? That too has a money value. So this idea that there's a single household provider, that whole language, I began to dismantle. so that we could really talk about the power dynamic and the money and what can afford and who decides and who is really bringing in and providing is a totally different story than just income bracket.
Is it possible to not have a power dynamic, or if it's inherent, is there a way to reduce it? Is that even a thing to want?
Well, but that I will answer this to you differently. There is no relationship without power dynamic. That is not a dirty word for me. The minute you depend on someone, they have power. That every kid knows that. So power dynamic just means that there is a different sense of agency, a different sense of responsibility, because power is also responsibility. That is normal. That is in every relationship. Is there the possibility of not having power dynamics around money? Very rarely. Because most people decide that the one who's going to manage the money is the one who kind of can add better than the other. I mean, it's often done on the basis of, or works in something that says they should know money better, which is not at all always the case, that they therefore will be a better investor or manager or bill payer on time and all of that. Because that too is money, but that doesn't mean that it's an oppressive power. Power is not just a power over, it's also power to.
Yeah, I suppose extending that, what does, in your experience, it look like when a couple healthily navigates that power dynamic?
It's the fact that they can talk about it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. When I looked at all the questions, in the end, the challenge of the question was not the issue. The challenge of the question was how to bring the issue up in the relationship. And therefore, the better management is not about there is no power. It's just that people can bring it up and talk about it. You know, I know you don't really want to move. I know you don't really think we should have a new car, but listen, the tires are falling off. Can you listen to me? And can you hear it as care? Because many times it's care rather than control. What makes a power dynamic fraught is the fact that often care morphs into control or looks like control. And the other person reacts as if you're trying to control when in fact you really are trying to care. So what helps people navigate it the best is their ability to communicate about it in a way that is not instantly reactive and defensive and blaming and all the usual stuff that makes communication miserable and therefore a relationship non-functional. It's not the unique issues around the money. I can't emphasize that enough. You should explain to me. I've already explained it to you. Yeah, but you didn't explain it so I could understand. That's a classic. Oh, take care of me is such an infantile wish so many of us have. Do it for me. I don't really want to. I trust you. No, you would never do anything terrible to me like that, which is often not the case. So what helps? To be adult. To understand the balance between freedom and responsibility. To understand that an adult, as my kid often says, I didn't know that in adulthood you have to do so many things you don't want to do. I thought that was part of childhood. Yes, an adult also does a lot of things that you just don't want to do.
I know something we've also talked a lot about is actually, frankly, one of the reasons that grounded even what our product looks like is how important it is to both look at the numbers. Because if one person doesn't look at the numbers at all, it really, I think, increases the power dynamic.
Yes.
Where only one person
Information
knows.
is power.
Exactly.
If you're the only one who knows, what is available, what is in the account, what has come in, etc., you have power. And that doesn't mean it's a problem. But if you use that, it's a problem. If you use it in a way that doesn't keep the interests of everyone in mind. But sometimes people do think they've taken the interest of everybody in mind. They've done this financial providing, and then the family dissolves, which is a high rate of people. And that's when the other person begins to say, but I never, you can come back and say, I didn't know enough. But that's not the ones you're servicing. So you're servicing people for whom having this thing in front of them, if it's extremely clear, it's like having an advisor. Instead of just relying on my partner to explain to me, I have an advisor explaining to me, which is what I often recommend to people, is get an advisor or get an app. It will walk you through it. And you can make it go as slow as you need to. You won't push on the button until you figure that thing out.
What would you say to the couple where one person maybe says, oh, my partner works in finance, so he just handles this for us. And my role in our relationship is not to look at the money, is to do other things.
I've done this, been there a few times. I mean, I would have in the past said nothing. That's where I've changed. I would have, this is, I think, very important, is that this has not been a static thing. Where I am today is even influenced by what I'm learning from you as well. It's like to be more aware of these things and not just say, yeah, why not? Seems to work. Is to say that is very nice arrangement. But I'm sure on occasion you want to have a chance to talk with your partner about your kids' school results. That doesn't mean that they're the ones who's talking with the teachers and everything, But on occasion you go together to the parent conference because you are both parents of this creature. Well, you are both the guardians of your assets too. So once a year, I think it's a good thing for you to sit down and have a sense of what's what. I've met too many people who, when things became problematic, didn't have a clue, and it didn't bode well for them. Don't put yourself in that kind of vulnerable position. It's just, you don't know where this goes, and therefore you should know. And that doesn't mean they will or they won't or that I don't trust. It's the same like with the prenup. Somebody says, why you want to do a prenup? That means that you don't trust me. I wouldn't. No, it's got nothing to do with it. And then don't put the trust in it as a way to, look at it as the purpose of the transaction itself. So that's what I say today is, I understand. I think that in couples divide roles all the time. But it's good to not be completely ignorant on some things that have such a direct effect on you.
Yeah, well, I think very much adding to that, right? I think one of the things we talk about in the company is you don't need to be the driver. You don't need to drive the decisions around money, but you need to be a passenger in the car. And, people don't like to talk about death either. Divorce is hard enough to talk about, but death is even harder. Yes. And there's unexpected deaths. And that's, another situation where you don't want to be the person who doesn't know where any of the accounts are. You don't even know where to ask to see what your partner
And then everything is behind a password in a digital archive, which you have zero access to. That takes a long time to open up to. No. All of this, I never thought this was part of therapy. But now I do. I do at least enough to ask the question and say to people, don't let this just... but the death one is huge. The amount of people who don't know where anything is, anything.
And I think something we hear is sometimes one of the reasons for that is, well, it's privacy.
But you are like the estate lawyer, right? You store it.
Yes.
I mean, people store it with an estate lawyer. Exactly. I don't want you to know, but the day you need to, it is somewhere where you can go and get it.
Yeah.
This is what you're going to have in your app too, no?
Yeah.
Okay.
So one of the things we hear a lot of couples navigate is, how do we find the balance between what we talk about together versus what we treat as independent and individual money? And that's also a dynamic that we see a lot of times, which leads to ultimately people not necessarily talking about money, people having more things that are private or not looking at what they do together, sitting down. So how do you view or find that balance between togetherness and individuality?
So I start through the back door. I think that the balance of togetherness and separateness or individuality in a couple is among the two, if not the most important task of a relationship. I don't have to start with money. The making of a couple is that process of how you come together and you maintain your individuality and come together a little bit more and have a period where the together is the main focus. And then you have the piece where there is more individuality. I mean, it's not static for the course of your life, but it is the most important dynamic thing you manage in the course of a relationship. And you start with that. And you begin by talking, it goes from, do you wake up together and go to bed together? Do you leave a party together? Do you share all your friends? Do you see friends still alone? Do you encourage each other to see your friends alone? Do you do every travel together? You broaden it. You first highlight the dimension, the task, the relational task of managing or balancing individuality and togetherness. And then you just ask it vis-a-vis money. And then the first thing is not how do you balance it, but are people aware that that's something they need to do? And are they aware that this is something that changes? If an accident occurs to me, our balance of interdependence will be different. If one of us, we have a big age gap and one of us becomes older and the other one is still in a different life stage. So it's really essential to explain to people it's a relational task and it accompanies you till the relationship is finished or over, whatever the reason is. Within that, so is the finances. If you get an inheritance, do you tell your partner what you got? Because as you move, there's a possibility that something like that may come. Or you may get stuck in a company, or you may have suddenly an asset you didn't have. I see this a lot around my friends at this moment because their aging parents are going. An apartment was left somewhere, a little, it doesn't have to be big, but it changes your life sometimes. That little asset that suddenly appears just at a particular moment, a critical moment. How do you divide? And there is what do you know? There is what do you combine? There is how do you combine? Like what are the pieces you should combine? So I think what's interesting in what you're doing is that this is actually not just related to, you're focusing on a particular life stage, but the thing itself. Yeah. It goes on. It's part of the same task. Now, how do you help people balance it? I think it's the same thing. What has worked for you? First of all, have you talked about it? How have the conversations been? What has worked for you? And what are the changes that you have implemented? Because if people are able to tell you things that they've changed and how did these changes come about, you get a sense of how flexible and adaptive they are. And they can respond to the circumstances of life. Money is not a static thing, and the relationship needs to be flexible around that.
I also really liked what you said about the three questions, for the first one being, what do you know? What is that balance between keeping something that is private and it's a good thing and it's an independence, feature, and when does it become actually something that is a secret and it's naturally negative or corrosive?
I've had a few secrets recently on the podcast on Where Should We Begin, and it's kids that you didn't know existed, that somebody's taking care of. That's money that's going somewhere. You thought the partner was making X, but in fact they're making a different amount because there's a chunk of it that is going to alimony. And you didn't know that. So financial privacy is one thing. Financial secrecy or dishonesty, or what sometimes people want to cheekily call financial infidelity, is a different story.
How would you define that to a couple? So a couple can answer, am I keeping my privacy and independence, or is this actually something that has become a secret and it's not good for us?
But it depends in the context. You see, every question you ask me relationally for me is contextual. And there's not a one size fits all. In a good situation, how do people know what is entitled for them to be kept private? It starts again. Do you people talk about your exes? Is that a part of the conversation of the relationship? Does this relationship admit that there have ever been other people? Does this relationship admit other people in its midst? Does this relationship admit other partners, more than two? So you get a sense as to where people put the boundaries and what they define as privacy or what they think is part of the common pool of knowledge by asking about other things. Then you say, how does this apply to money? Yeah. I don't zoom into the money. I don't zoom into many things. I I go and I do like this and I check around. Is it expected? When one of you spends something, at what amount are you expected to let the other person know? 100? 500? You know, because there's just, and then what are the things that are expected to be discussed? Because sometimes you see a couple and if one of them buys tech stuff and a camera and a laptop and a this, it's all supposedly good for the cause, you know. But if the other one went and bought whatever that is for the house or for themselves or for that is considered, you know, fluffy. So there's a hierarchy, and who gets to decide that? What is worthy or not worthy? And then you get a sense, how is it that when you went to buy that, you don't have to check a thing because you thought we need a new TV screen? But when your partner went to buy a bike, you know, but the TV screen is for everybody, you know, and then you start to see the criteria. Also, so if there is, if it's for everyone, it's allowed. But if it's, and you, for you, the bike, I don't bike. Yeah, but there are other people maybe in this house who see, and you get I don't answer the questions. I help people to answer their own questions. But I will take them down the road. And in the midst, I will say, that's very interesting. Is that a principle you both have agreed on? Or is that a principle by which you live? And have you ever bothered checking if your partner lives by the same principle? I don't get that sense. Should we talk about this?
Yeah. And I think especially because there isn't as much of a dynamic nowadays for most couples of, oh, we got married, everything's fully joined from day one. We moved into for the first time, we bought a house, and there's not as much of that.
I think it's great to tell people, sit
Mm-hmm.
down and just take a look. Sometimes once a year, you look at the house and you say, what needs fixing here? Sometimes once a year, you say, what would be the trip we would like to take this year? Sometimes once a year, you should sit with your finances and say, where are we at? And not what do we have, but how are we managing relationally? What would you like to change in the way we've been managing the money?
Yeah.
Why? Just asking that question to your partner will go a long way.
I think that really resonates for us because about a once a year, we have thought about the system of how we manage money. Because when we first started dating, many things were private. That was normal. When we got engaged, I think we started sharing more about our own money. But, you know, even about last year after we got married, we did make the decision that we would be sharing pretty much all of the information, though with the requirement that if we bought things each independently, there wasn't going to be why did you buy that if we spent it on our own personal cards? But we think a lot, I think, about the system of managing money. And you know, when we first started building Plenty, I wasn't convinced that there would be certain frameworks that would be helpful or applicable for most couples because every couple is different. There isn't a one size fits all.
But that doesn't mean the framework isn't. The framework is beyond useful. But the framework is there to frame, and you need to fill in the middle. So it's not because I say people decide, but they decide and you present frames to them.
Yeah.
So what are some of the best systemic frames you have found about that?
I think, you know, we've experienced this where our income has changed. And as we think about years in the future, I think that will continue to evolve. You know, sometimes one person earns more, one person earns less. But going back to what you said earlier about the resources, it's supported by the other partner. And I think when we think about that for ourselves, I think the language you use is extremely important.
Yep.
So whether or not you say, I earn, you earn, or we earn this much, you know, together, this is how much we've brought in.
Yes.
I think that fundamentally shifts and captures the fact that even if one person might have a higher income, they are supported by the other partner often.
Right.
And so you also, I think, then end up working together more like a team, because you're really thinking about how do we as a team, you know, earn more of that priority.
Then if you sit in my office, my question to you is, how do you feel about the we? And how do you feel about the I? Do you like your balance?
Yeah.
Does the balance work? And if both people tell me the balance works, then I'm not looking for problems where there are none. And sometimes that may mean where one says to the other, you do it. I cannot say, hey, that's not a good idea. I can just say, I think you should know more. But this we, so when does a couple come? When the we is choking the I, or when the I has created too much distance and there is not enough we. That is a lot of what couples therapy is about.
I think one of the things we thought about from a framework to capture that, because I think as us as individuals, for all the couples that we've seen and worked with or have used our product, I do think having both is important to some degree for every couple.
No, not to some degree. It's essential.
Yes.
That is the most important frame. The frame of I and we, the frame of together apart, individual connected, is the most important frame of relationship. All relational systems, by the way, not just romantic. And therefore, the money is one of the places, one of the hubs where this dynamic of we and I plays itself out all the time.
I think one of the things that sometimes surprises couples that we've talked to or worked with is how important having both is. And it's also sometimes hard because it's not something we've ever been taught to decide how that works with money. And one things that we typically recommend, and of course this doesn't always work because every couple is different, is you start off with, this is how much we earn. And it's very much the we. We talk about what do we spend, you know, the shared expenses, whether that's the rent, the mortgage, the car, the utilities. Then capturing that there are things, because you're in a relationship, that you want to do together down the road. But then finally getting down to, after you take out money that you're saving, money that you've spent, making sure that the money that is left over is actually split. So you each have some money that you can do whatever you want. If you want to invest it, if you want to spend it, if you want to, whatever you want to do.
It's ours that we give to each of us alone.
Exactly. Almost like an allowance, you know, but like an adult allowance.
I think that's it's very clever, because the first three are reinforcing the relationship. Us, what we have, us, what we would like to have, and us, what we need to disburse. And then to make sure that there's a space left in the midst of us for each of us individually that is not accountable to the other, so that we can still feel free and not feel like we have to ask permission because we don't want to regress either. And I think that that's a very, very smart setup, actually, that you can apply to many things.
How would you think about applying that to things outside of money?
What are the things that you want that are important for you to do together? The holidays are important for us to do together. Things where you count on each other's presence. Because a major issue in many relationships is, I don't have to go there. It's not my thing. It's your thing. You go. Not interested. You know, why do I have to go to that? No, because it's part. So what is tradition? What is important? Are the family holidays important? Are the games important? Are the certain kind of trips important? You know, Sunday this, name it. So you have less of the what do we need to spend piece, but where do we want to be later on around that? Well, later on, when I stop working, or when I work less, or when I travel less for work, I would like to be able to do this and this and this. And then what are the things that you just want to do alone? Why do you keep trying to force your partner to go see movies that they really couldn't care less about? Go by yourself. Find somebody else. What are the conversations that you shouldn't be having with your partner because they're never satisfying? Find somebody else to have those conversations. What kind of trips would you like to take that your partner isn't interested in? Or sports activities that you would like to do that you don't go because they don't want to go and you don't want to be away. Go do your thing. So what are the things that the relationship needs in order to anchor itself into something that is solid and brings communality and shared reality and shared experience? And what are the things that the relationship can afford to give more freedom to each of the people who are in it? Because the anchor allows you to also open up and breathe. I mean, but that fits my model. It works for me because it resonates very much with how I conceptualize relationships. So I apply this, you know, it's part of why what you do makes so much sense to me. And because this, what I call the essential dynamic, is the way I map a relationship on all aspects. We don't eat this. We don't eat this. You know, it's like, I mean, this moment that you described, that was so funny. It's like the instead of I don't try to say anything, is to actually make a joke and say, you know how hard I'm trying not to say anything, because it becomes funny after a while. It's like he's thinking about this delicious omelet while you're thinking about, this is going to be like a $30 omelet.
Yeah.
Who can enjoy that? That would make me feel guilty just before I even took a bite. But it's funny. And when couples can make that funny, then they live with their differences in their midst, and they create, a harmony around these differences. Because the second most important dynamic in the couple is differences. One is together, we and I. The second, but we and I live is part of differences. It's an extension of that. So the second one is how much difference can you tolerate in your midst?
Yeah, I'm thinking that more of what you just said, where getting those differences out and not expecting to have no differences. Because I think a lot of times we come from this model of, obviously, what I think is right and my framework is right, and embracing the reality that you're going to have different frameworks. You're going to have different ways of thinking about everything in a relationship, but especially money. And talking about those things and being willing to understand the other person's differences and then bringing humor to it. And also being willing to understand that, maybe the avocado and the bacon actually are worth it on the omelet.
It's very difficult to explain that the money is a piece of it, but the money in the relationship is defined by the relationship.
Yeah.
And not by the money. I mean, the money, the ability, the scarcity of it, the having of it, the struggle around it, influences a relationship a lot. I think it's one of the biggest stressors, there's no doubt. But on the other side, the way that the relationship manages whatever issues around money determines the experience, not the money itself. That I wasn't even as aware of as since I began to look at the way people formulate their questions and what's at stake, what they really are worried about when they're going to have the conversation. And how do you help people have these difficult conversations? Because in 10 things that you people talk about money, for many other people would be very complicated. But for you, that's not your area. And every couple has an area. And then you tell them, but you have 5 other things that you never argue about, and there's no problem. You discuss, those are not your issues. This is your Achilles' heel. That's when it's problematic. The next piece of it is, how do you actually say, in the making of a couple, you will be a better couple if you manage your money well together. If money is part of the relational conversation from the beginning.
In that vein, one of the things we talk about and we strongly recommend is getting a prenup. And obviously there's
you got one and you wrote a piece about it, but what did you say in it that we should hear?
One of the things that I think is most important about a prenup is it requires you to have this conversation. It requires you to put all of your assets and liabilities on the table and share them with each other. Have a conversation about who owns and owes what, how the money and assets that are acquired during the relationship will be owned. And it also brings to light the reality that, at least in the United States, which state you live in and which state you get married in will determine the laws around property ownership in your marriage.
Yeah.
And they might be completely arbitrary and not at all what you think they are. Having a prenup allows you to create a foundation that is what you want it to be. And it can be pretty much whatever you want it to be. Something that we've talked about a lot, and we've heard from a lot of couples that have gone through the process.
And what is their biggest challenge around the process?
I think the biggest challenge that we hear is the stigma, that it's not romantic or that you're preparing for divorce. And the way that we like to think about it is it forces a conversation and requires you to really bring to light this reality of your assets, your money in a relationship. And it also insulates both of you in the future, insulates your families. I don't know if you have more to add there, Emily.
Yeah, I think one of the things for both of us that we talked a lot about is we believe that we were meant to meet each other, and that is completely at odds with the pragmatic hat that it doesn't work out for all couples. And I think in that case, we thought it was a responsible thing to do because we know we want to have kids, to make it as easy as possible. So that was one of the really important reasons why we got it.
Even soulmates have prenups.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. I think
that's the clash, right? Between the romantic and the...
For sure. But I think we believe deeply in both of those things. And I think we actually found a way to get a prenup that was non-traditional. I'm now wondering if it could be even more evolved to potentially have a couples therapist in the room. But what we ended up doing was we actually hired 3 lawyers. So normally you each hire a lawyer and one person writes the prenup, and then you both kind of are on opposite sides of the table and you negotiate all the terms. We didn't want to feel like we weren't on the same team. So we hired one lawyer and we sat down with that lawyer, all the 3 of us, and we walked through all of the different questions that we wanted captured. And I think for us, it also prompted a question that up until that point, we hadn't really talked about, which is, well, what if one of us stays home with the kids? Then what? Does that change how we might think about alimony? I think it prompted questions, and it also helped us envision what we wanted out of a partnership together. It ended up actually informing how we decided to ultimately merge our finances because we already talked about it and we didn't just fall into it. But then after we drafted the entire prenup with this lawyer, we then, because it's legally required, then hired our independent lawyers to do a quick review. But we had already agreed upon the entirety of the substance of the prenup. So it felt really different. I'd imagine actually that even in that conversation, especially for couples who are talking about money for the first time, or maybe some of these questions are new, it could potentially be helpful to have someone even guide through some of the conversations.
The majority of couples that I have dealt with around prenup, but of course it's in a therapy office and people don't come when there are no problems. So, but it usually was not a joint conversation. It was one person presenting a prenup to the other. So that in itself is already a different conversation.
Yeah.
So the piece about it forces us to have the conversation rather than one. If you come alone, then it reinforces the idea that you have assets that you want to protect from me and that you want to make sure not to lose. And you already, it doesn't matter even if I imagine that we could divorce or say, but basically the point is you've already told me that you're seeing this as yours and we just begun. And often it's done by people who have a lot more. There's no doubt. So is there a difference when the gap is big versus when the gap is 2 young people with some differences but not mega differences?
I think I'd imagine it'd be easier when the differences aren't as big.
Yes.
I think one of the things we also did capture is how do we think about what we earn over the course of a marriage? And that was where we had made a decision that is ours. Doesn't matter if one person earns more, one person earns less, one person stays home, but that is together what we are contributing to the marriage. So I think that part of the prenup actually felt like even if there were differences at the beginning, it still captured that for our marriage, we still viewed it as us building together. One thing that we do see with couples is how do you talk about what you want in the future? And how do you set goals and find the balance between our goals together, our goals independently, and also how much do we sacrifice today for these future goals? And one of the things that we've noticed is it's hard to really connect with your future self and what that's going to feel like or look like if you make a decision to save more, to spend more. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts around that piece about connecting with your future self.
I have a sense that the conversation around money needs to evolve as the relationship evolves. You can't have this future self thing in the first 2-3 years.
Yeah.
Just but you do live in a culture that completely puts work at the heart of things and makes it very difficult for anyone to say, you really want to work that much all the time? Because it's supposed to be not cool to hold someone's back from their professional aspirations and goals and all of that.
Mhm.
That's in the event of doing white collar work. In the event of I have to work because I have to feed myself, it's a different conversation. So I think it's okay to ask people sometimes, the same way that people may ask, would you like to have kids? It's okay to say, is it important for you to make money? That's a basic young people conversation. How did your family deal with money? You can start by talking about others. What was the culture of money in the house? Who made the decisions around the money? How was money valued? What was allowed to be spent on, etc.?
It makes me think about the question we asked too, which is, what is enough?
That's a great question. That's a great question. What is enough, and what is a good reason to do something out of the ordinary? Have there ever been major financial shifts in your life? I think talking about the family is a good way to talking about the future, because people say, I would like to be like that, or I would never want that.
Mhm.
They kind of tell you instantly what their goals are.
Mhm.
One person in the family kept losing money. One person in the family gambled. One person in the family, mismanaged. All of that, and that has shaped
Mhm.
how I want to deal with money. So you ask about the future by often inquiring about the past, because it's often a reaction to or a response to. I think then, what are your goals is actually a rather non-threatening conversation. I have seen many people who often worked for 2 decades making meaning, and then at one point they say, now I want to make money. And then other people who have made money by doing whatever it was, but it wasn't exactly what they wanted to do. What they wanted was to be a teacher or an artist or a writer or this or that. And what they ended up doing was working in an accounting office. It's not but now they want the meaning. They've done the money. So the future isn't necessarily going to be what you imagine it to be. But you can ask, how important is it for you to make money? How important is it for you to save? Are you someone who lives for the day, or are you someone who lives for the future? If you have 3 circles, past, present, future, how do these circles overlap for you? Is the future there and the past and the present here? Are they all 3 superposing each other? In which one influences the other? Is the past a small little thing, but the present and the future? How do you make your choices? I start a career now that I think is going to take me there, or, I haven't figured out what I want to do and I'm just going to wait until I know. That kind of thing. And in the meantime, I do something really interesting or not interesting or remunerated. So the future questions to me are easy because there's low stakes. The debts, the stuff from the past you carry with you, are much more complicated. Do you see that, or do you think that there's a challenge in people talking about their goals?
I think it's definitely more challenging to talk about the debts, because I think there's a sense of, I can't change it. It's what is.
Yeah.
There's more of a sense of possibility, but I think sometimes can also be fear. I'm scared of wanting. I'm scared of dreaming, because what if it doesn't happen? What if I dream too big and then I set myself up for disappointment? And I think that can play out in financial goals too.
But you could also succeed. Yeah. But that becomes, if a person holds themselves back like that, the first thing I say is that only around money for you? Or is this a way of the way you hold yourself back much of the time? You know that if you hold yourself back to not fail, you also hold yourself back to not succeed. Yeah. So do you want to keep it this way, or is that something you would like to try? And do you think doing this around money is the place you want to try that? And gender issues come in, and cultural issues come in. This is where, your thing about don't outsmart your partner because, that makes a man insecure. That's age old. Not even from your own culture. It's global.
Yeah.
I don't want to I don't want to be this woman who, that is all. And the same in reverse. There is 10 times more stigma about a guy who doesn't provide than towards a woman who doesn't provide.
And it's not, I think, simple, right? Because I think even with the, I don't want to outsmart, there's also just as much of the feeling she's like, I want to be taken care of. I want to be protected. I want to feel safe.
Yep.
But I want both.
Yes.
I want to be myself, but I also want to feel this.
Yes, we are in a mega transition and we want contradictory things. Absolutely. And I think the best thing is the conversations about it. You don't solve all of these things because they're not problems that you solve. They're paradoxes that you manage.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is the point of this thing is, yes, I want to be this and I want the exact opposite as well.
Yeah. And I hear from especially a lot of women too, is I want to be professionally driven right now, but maybe I don't want that later. So, but I want both because there's both parts of me within one person.
All people, straight, queer, all people who are in a role, and imagine the role is working, making money, paying the bills, etc., 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 would like to know, whatever the role is, that if they couldn't, somebody else would step in. The issue is not the role. The issue is not to feel alone in the role. It's exactly what I started with you. What we often want is, we don't resent doing it. We just want to know that if we didn't, or chose for a while not, or couldn't, someone could step in. And that it doesn't just completely rest all on us. That we are not alone in this world, like alone. We are, but we would like to feel on occasion that we're not. It's that. I want to work. I want to make the money. I want to be the business person. I want to, whatever it is that you do. But I would like to just know that my partner can step in if ever I don't.
Or alone in managing the money.
It's directly connected.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true, but it is the thing that I often come back to, that I see that people are not resentful about what they do, but they often are resentful about the aloneness that they feel about being the one to do it. They don't, if you say, would you like to stop this job? No, I like my job. Then what is it? I just don't want to feel like I'm the only one thinking about the bills, the money, the responsibility. It's that I want. I want to know that my partner is that it's not just all on me, but I like doing it. See, I think that when you have room for that, rather than thinking that it's either this or that, you do better with those kind of issues in life.
Thank you so much for joining us as an advisor and for today's episode. One final question before we wrap up. For a couple that's newly married, what advice would you have for them around money?
Don't think of it as a crass topic, as a thing that should just kind of come into its own on its own. A relationship today is both practical and romantic. And don't wait till you divorce to find out how practical it actually was. It's really both. We do root our relationships, our marriages in love and affection and trust and romance. But that doesn't mean that everything else about it, partnership, economic support, family life for some, all of those things have diminished. We've just added on top of the traditional system. And you are in transition. It's no longer the old patriarchal model, but it is not yet a defined other model, because there may not be one defined other model. There may be many. And money is an inherent piece of what the making of a relationship will involve. So be matter of fact about it, actually. Make it less precious. It's important, but it doesn't have to be precious, hidden, taboo, queasy. Like any other topic, if you start from the beginning, then it's integrated in the system. And you don't have to wait for the day that. It's like good sex education. It doesn't start on a particular day. It's part of life. It's part of the conversation about living and dying. And this is the same. This is about the present, the past, the future, the legacy, what people left behind, what they never left behind, what they had, what they lost. It's what an extraordinarily rich conversation. It's not just how much do you make and what do you want to do with it. And once you start like that, you set the ground for the particular unique moments when you need to make decisions. That's today's input. I don't think I would answer this question twice the same way.
Well, that was fantastic advice. Thank you so much for
It's a
making
pleasure.
time to join
Thank
us
you.
today.